Hello everyone, and welcome back to Mindful Stories Motivation, where every story helps us live wisely, think positively, and grow stronger every day. Today's story is about the dangers of making decisions in anger and the power of calm, thoughtful judgment. As you listen, you'll also learn new English words and sentences that you can practice later. Because stories don't just touch our hearts, they also sharpen our minds. So, take a deep breath. Sit back, relax, and stay with me till the end. Once upon a time, in a faraway kingdom surrounded by green hills and silver rivers, there lived a young king named David. He was just 25 years old, wise for his age, yet still learning the ways of leadership. From childhood, David had been guided by a kind and thoughtful teacher named Edward. Edward wasn't just a scholar. He was a man of deep wisdom, compassion, and balance. He taught David not only about the world, its politics, history, and art, but also about life, how to be patient, how to listen, and how to think before acting. When David's father, the old king, passed away, Edward became more than just a teacher. He became the chief minister and David's most trusted counselor. Under their guidance, the kingdom flourished. The people admired their young ruler and often said that behind every wise decision was the mind of Edward, the old sage. But life, as always, has its tests. One year, the kingdom faced a terrible drought. The skies turned silent, the rivers dried up, and crops began to wither under the cruel summer sun. Farmers walked miles just to fetch a bucket of water. Children cried for food. And in the royal palace, the young king grew anxious. Edward, who had been responsible for the seasonal weather forecast and food storage, had made an error in prediction. He believed the rains would come early, so fewer grains were stored. But the rains never came. When the king discovered the mistake, his heart burned with frustration. "How could you be so careless?" David shouted in anger. "Your error has brought suffering to my people." Edward bowed his head. "My king," he said softly, "I accept my mistake. But please, do not act in anger. Let us find a solution." But David interrupted. "I trusted you with everything. Leave this kingdom at once and never return." The words cut deep. Edward's eyes were calm, though his heart was heavy. He looked at David, the same boy he had raised, guided, and loved like a son, and simply nodded. "As you wish, my king." And just like that, Edward left the palace, walking alone into the unknown, without anger, without bitterness, only with quiet sorrow in his heart. He traveled far until he reached a small, peaceful village at the edge of the kingdom. There he decided to start a new life, not as a royal advisor, but as a simple farmer. He built a small hut surrounded by fields. He tilled the soil with his own hands and shared meals with the villagers. Even though he had enough gold to live comfortably, he chose a humble life, believing that wisdom grows best in the soil of simplicity. Soon, the villagers noticed his calmness and intelligence. They began to visit him for advice. "Edward," they'd ask, "how do we solve this land dispute?" Or, "What's the best way to save our crops from pests?" He would listen patiently, smile gently, and guide them with thoughtful words. The villagers began to call him the wise farmer. Back in the palace, months passed, but peace did not return to King David's heart. He missed Edward deeply. Every time he faced a difficult decision about trade, defense, or law, he found himself asking, "What would Edward have advised me to do?" And each time, there was silence. One evening, as he sat alone in the royal garden, he whispered to himself, "I sent away the one man who truly cared for me, and I did it in anger." Regret began to grow within him like a shadow. So the king decided to make amends. He sent soldiers in every direction to search for Edward and bring him home. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, but no one could find him. Some said he had crossed the border. Others said he had vanished into the mountains. Still, David refused to give up. Then one night, as he was reflecting in his chamber, a memory of Edward's teachings returned to him. When you cannot find wisdom, test for it. True wisdom always reveals itself. And that gave the king an idea. The next morning, David gathered his messengers and gave them an unusual command. He said, "Send a letter and a clay jar to every village in the kingdom. In the letter, write this message: the king requests each village to fill this jar with wisdom and return it within 1 month. If you fail, you must fill it with precious jewels instead." The messengers rode off, delivering the jars and letters far and wide, until one jar finally reached the village where Edward lived. The headman read the letter out loud in confusion. A jar filled with what? Wisdom? What does that even mean? The villagers gathered, murmuring in fear. "If we fail," said one man, "we'll have to give the king jewels. But we don't have any." "We'll be punished," cried another. Finally, someone said, "Let's go to Edward. He will know what to do." So the entire group went to Edward's small farm, holding the jar and the king's letter. "Wizened Edward," the headman said, "the king demands wisdom in a jar. Please help us. Only you can save us." Edward read the letter, then smiled softly. "Wisdom cannot be placed in a jar. But don't worry, give me a little time. By the end of the month, I'll return this jar, filled with wisdom." The villagers trusted him completely and left the jar in his care. Days passed. Edward worked on his farm as usual, watering his plants, tending to the soil, and thinking deeply about the king's message. One morning, he noticed a tiny pumpkin vine curling along the ground. It was fresh, green, and full of life. He paused, and an idea sparked in his mind. He gently placed a small pumpkin blossom inside the jar, still attached to the vine. He did not cut it. He let nature do its work. Day after day, he watered the plant and cared for it. The pumpkin began to grow and grow and grow until it filled the entire jar. It grew so large that it couldn't be taken out without breaking the jar. He smiled. "Wisdom," he said to himself, "is not something you can force into shape. It must grow within the boundaries you give it." When the month ended, he sealed the jar and handed it back to the village headman. "Take this to the king," he said, "and tell him it is filled with wisdom." When the jar reached the royal palace, King David opened it curiously. Inside, he saw the giant pumpkin, perfectly shaped to the jar's form. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he smiled. Only one man could have done this. Only Edward. He understood the message instantly. True wisdom cannot be forced. It grows naturally when given time, care, and patience. And he also realized something else, that his anger had blinded him once, but this time he would act with calmness and gratitude. Without delay, the king saddled his horse and rode out himself, determined to find Edward, not as a ruler, but as a humble man seeking forgiveness. When David finally reached the small village, the people were surprised to see the king himself riding through their streets. He asked where the wise farmer lived, and they led him to Edward's little hut. Edward was sitting outside, quietly feeding birds. When he saw David, he stood and bowed slightly, though his eyes were gentle, not cold. David dismounted, tears glimmering in his eyes. "Edward," he said softly, "I came to ask for your forgiveness. I was blinded by anger. I sent you away when I needed you the most." Edward placed a hand on his shoulder. "My dear David, anger is a storm. It passes, but sometimes it destroys what we love before it's gone. I forgave you long ago." David bowed his head. "Will you come back with me?" Edward smiled. "Yes, if you promise to rule with patience and wisdom, not pride and temper. I promise." And from that day forward, Edward returned to the palace, not just as a minister, but as a symbol of wisdom and forgiveness. The kingdom flourished again, and people said that King David had become even wiser than before, because he had learned the greatest lesson of all. Never make decisions in anger, for words and actions born in fury often leave scars that regret can never heal. So, what can we learn from King David and Edward? Don't make decisions in anger. When emotions are high, wisdom is low. Wait, breathe, think. Calmness is strength. A peaceful mind sees what anger hides. Patience grows wisdom. Like the pumpkin in the jar, true insight takes time to form. And finally, forgiveness and understanding bring peace, both to others and to yourself. Thank you for listening to today's story on Mindful Stories Motivation. If you enjoyed it, make sure to like, comment, and share how this story helped you learn or think differently. Keep practicing